Another movie review, and this is a 1960 movie. It's a foreign language movie in Italian with English subtitles. Its Italian title is Ciociara, get it right, La Ciociara, and in English that means two women. It's directed by Vittorio DeSica. There will be a slide with the details of this, so you can peruse that. Screenplay by Cesare Zavattini, and Vittorio DeSica chipped in on this as well. It's based on a book by Alberto Moravia called Two Women. It's produced by Carlo Ponti, and in the cast, in the lead role is the brilliant, well, don't wish to overemphasize, Sophia Loren as Sierra. Jean-Paul Belmondo plays Michel Delibrio, and Eleonora Brown plays Rosita, who's the daughter of Cesario, and Carlo Ninci as Filippo, Michel's father. There are obviously a supporting cast, and many of those details will be on the slide. So that's basically where we're at. Now, one vital piece of information that I haven't told you was that at the Academy Award, Sophia Loren won the Best Actress Oscar, and this was the first time in Oscar history that an award, an acting award to either male or female, had been won for a performance in a foreign language. So it gives you some idea of the brilliance of this movie. Lead character, Cecilia, played by Sophia Loren. So if nothing else, I could stop now and just tell you, go and see this movie, because this woman is absolutely brilliant. To a brief summary of the plot, the movie's set in 1944. We start out in Rome. Of course, the Italians have been at war, but the war is now turning very much in favour of the Allies. Rome is a heavily bombed city and a very, very dangerous place, bombing daily. Cecilia, she runs a grocery shop, but because of the constant bombardment, her anxiety levels have shot up, her fear for herself and her daughter have grown, and so she decides to flee Rome to a village, we're not quite sure how far away. A glimpse of a relationship between Cesario with Giovanni. Now, Giovanni's a married man, and we suspect that there's a probable physical relationship. And he does want a serious relationship with Cesario, but of course he's married. And this brings in all the issues of morality, Catholicism, and the issues of the time about sex outside marriage. They leave the city, and we see shots of that city as the train departs. And shortly after this, a recent bombing has damaged the railway track, and this forces the train to leave the track. The passengers are now left to fend for themselves, and Cesare looking for the fascists, and they're looking for deserters from the Italian army. As I mentioned, the war was very much turning against them, and deserters were rampant. Anyway, a little bit about the character of Cesaria comes out here, as we see that she doesn't lack any self-confidence. In fact, she's a bit of a hothead and unwilling to be mute and subservient, and she gives as good as she gets to the militia, who are basically wanting information, and they leave with their tail between their legs, she having offered nothing. We do witness a bystander that's killed by a fighter plane in this war zone, and Cecilia is constantly trying to protect the daughter, shield herself from war, but she can't do it with regard to the image of the dead person on the side of the road. And then we get to the village, and the feeling within the movie changes somewhat. Village has a very jocular, optimistic view of life. It's tried to sort of move aside the horror of war, and the family greet Cecilia and her daughter, and we get a real sense of sort of belonging and harmony and care. The harsh realities of survival constantly are in picture, but there remains a humanity here, and humour is used as a powerful tool to survive the carnage. There's also some political debate that we gather about how the war's going. There's the fascist viewpoint, which held still by some, versus the concept of what liberation could mean to Italy after years under Mussolini. Small talk is certainly in evidence, and we catch up on a picture of a village that's very short of food. The food is very highly priced. Of course, there's no schooling. And there's also a tongue-in-cheek chat, which I recall, about Russian women. And it's an all-consuming environment, it has to be said. Move on to Cecilia meeting Michel Rapport, a young man that she is aware of. And we get more of this very believable comedic and a romantic sort of scenes. Michel is a bit of an idealistic comic, but he has got access to some food, which is certainly in need. And he's also wanted by the German occupiers and the fascist collaborators. And then two Mussolini supporters arrive in the village, interrupt this atmosphere of relaxation, and there's verbal hostilities between the two Mussolini stooges and Cecilia and Michel. To cut a long story, we get a discussion about the traitors to fascism, but Cecilia once again gives as good as she got, but she has to part from Michel as he's arrested, and he leaves. After this, she feels that she's got to move on, so she decides to return back to Rome. It's a very emotionally poignant moment in the film, and there's clearly a fear between us is a constant companion as we continue to view Cecilia and her daughter's slow return. We're not quite sure what the planes are. Are they German or are they American? But they're certainly bombarding the landscape. Rosetta is very much a mute-like character. She lacks a lot of self-confidence, really hasn't got much of a personality, and is being babied by Sierra. Eventually, because of the incessant bombardment, both of them decide to go to an abandoned church, and there we witness the scenes that are the most harrowing in this movie. They are sort of hiding in this church, waiting for a lull in the bombardment, and then some collaborators, Moroccan Arab soldiers working with the fascists, enter, and we see in some detail, although of course it is 1960, the rape by these soldiers of both Cecilia and her daughter. They are virtually left for dead. However, amazingly, they manage to survive. Cecilia wakes up, and her anger and despair is all too evident. She finds her child, and her child is in very much a catatonic state. The whole episode extremely traumatic, and for them both, and I think for you as a viewer, the tragedy of war as it had an indelibly stamp on them, and they will never be the same again. The movie then moves on to post-war, and then she starts to being stripped of her childhood, so to speak. She engages in some radical change in her behaviour, and she starts to go out and ends up in a bar fraternising with men who are out for only one thing. Her clothing is very sort of sexual, and we get a clear picture of how this girl is so damaged that she's resorting to offering herself to try and soften the pain. Her mother eventually finds her in a bar, and it's now clear that the two women are both physically and emotionally changed through the experiences at the church. And although Rosetta's still a child, the closing shot captures the fall in its entirety, really, as we view her and her mother. As I said, this was a performance that earned a Best Actress Oscar for Sophia Loren, and it is definitely justified. It was a movie that I'd never seen before. I watched it about 18 months ago, and it still has a distinct impression on me. So I suggest you really ought to get to watch it. It's called Two Women. It was released in 1960, directed by Vittorio DeSica, and starring Sophia Loren.